The boardroom of Kestrel Enterprises had never felt more like a gilded cage. Late afternoon sunlight streamed through floor-to-ceiling windows, setting the mahogany conference table ablaze while leaving the faces of its occupants in shadow. The air smelled of expensive aftershave and fear, the particular acrid scent that only manifests when fortunes are about to change hands. Richard Hampton sat at the head of the table, his silver hair catching the light like a crown. At 72, he carried his age like armor, every wrinkle a battle scar, every gray hair a medal of endurance. His hands, veined and spotted with time, rested motionless before him. They were the hands that had built an empire from a $10,000 loan and a rented warehouse. Now they barely twitched as his protege drove the knife in. "You're not just outdated," Ethan Cole said, his voice cutting through the artificial chill of climate-controlled air. "You're obsolete." A collective inhale from the 12 other executives. Martha from accounting actually dropped her pen. It rolled across the polished surface, the sound absurdly loud in the silence. Richard didn't blink. "You forget yourself, Ethan." His voice was deceptively calm, the way the ocean is calm before a tsunami. "This company has survived recessions, hostile takeovers, and 2 market crashes. It'll survive your temper tantrum." Ethan's smile didn't reach his eyes. He stood slowly, deliberately, his 6-foot frame unfolding like a threat. His charcoal Brioni suit probably cost more than most junior executives made in a month, but it was the way he wore it, like armor, that really set him apart from the old guard. "I don't think you understand," Ethan said, pulling his phone from his pocket. "This isn't a debate. It's a transfer of power." The screen glowed as he turned it toward the room. The Kestrel internal memo was unmistakable, as was the number beside Ethan's name. 51.3%. Majority control. Effective immediately. For the first time in 40 years, Richard Hampton looked old. Chaos erupted. Gerald from legal actually stood so fast his chair toppled backward. The CFO began whispering frantically into his phone. Through it all, Ethan remained perfectly still, watching Richard with the cold calculation of a chess master who'd already seen 10 moves ahead. "How?" Richard managed. Just the one word, but it carried the weight of his entire legacy. The door clicked open. All heads turned. Miranda Kestrel stood in the doorway like a particularly elegant ghost. Richard's ex-wife hadn't set foot in this building since the infamous divorce settlement that had nearly sunk the company 15 years earlier. Her signature red hair was now a sophisticated silver blonde, her once sharp features softened by time, but no less dangerous. She wore white when everyone else wore black, a walking provocation. "Hello, Richard," she purred. "Did you really think I'd let you keep what was mine?" The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Richard's face went through 3 separate emotions before settling on something resembling horrified understanding. "You," he breathed. Miranda glided into the room, her Louboutins clicking like a countdown timer on the marble floor. She stopped beside Ethan, not touching him, but the alignment was unmistakable. "You always underestimated the women in your life," she said to Richard. "First me, then your daughter. Now ... She gestured to the room at large. "All of them." Ethan cleared his throat. "As of 9 this morning, Kestrel Enterprises has new leadership. The transition will be immediate. All departments will report to me by end of business today." Richard finally found his voice. "You can't just—" "Actually," Miranda interrupted, pulling a folded document from her Birkin. "He can. And has." She slid the papers across to Richard. "Our daughter's shares, remember? The ones you generously let her keep when you forced her out? Combined with what Ethan's been quietly acquiring. Well, math is math." Richard didn't touch the documents. His hands had started trembling, just slightly, and he clearly couldn't bear for anyone to see. "Sophie would never—" "Sophie hasn't spoken to you in 8 years, Miranda said sweetly, "but she still answers my calls." The room held its collective breath. This wasn't just a corporate coup. This was a family execution, played out with billion-dollar stakes. Ethan straightened his cuffs. "Security will escort you to pack your office. You'll have 1 hour. Richard's laugh was hollow. "You're making a mistake, Ethan. This company is bleeding market share to competitors half our age," Ethan finished. "Our tech is outdated, our supply chain is inefficient, and our brand is becoming irrelevant. You built an empire, Richard. I intend to keep it from becoming a relic." The silence that followed was broken by Miranda's phone buzzing. She glanced at the screen, then at Ethan. "The press release is going out in 5 minutes. Wall Street Journal already has the scoop." Ethan nodded. "Then we're done here." Richard stood abruptly, his chair scraping loud enough to make several people jump. For a moment it looked like he might actually lunge at Ethan. Then his shoulders sagged, just slightly, and the fight drained out of him. He turned without another word and walked toward the door. Miranda stepped aside to let him pass. As he drew even with her, she said softly, "You should have taken the settlement I offered in '09. Richard paused, his back to the room. When he spoke, his voice carried all the weight of his years. "This isn't over." Then he was gone. The door clicked shut behind him. For a long moment, no one moved. Then Ethan turned to face the room, his expression unreadable. "Now," he said, "let's talk about layoffs." The silence after Richard's exit lasted exactly 7 seconds. Then the room erupted. Gerald from legal was the first to break. "You can't just—" "I can," Ethan said, cutting him off. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't have to. The weight of that 51.3% stake filled the room like a physical presence. Miranda took a seat at the table, crossing her legs with deliberate leisure. She pulled out a cigarette, real tobacco, not electronic, and lit it without asking permission. The smoke curled upward, a thin gray line in the sunlight. No one dared tell her to put it out. "First order of business," Ethan said, tapping a key on the conference room's AV system. The screens lit up with a spreadsheet. "We're cutting 20% of the workforce, starting with dead weight." A murmur of disbelief. Martha from accounting paled. "You're firing people today?" "Not firing." Restructuring Ethan's gaze swept the room. "If you're in this room, congratulations. You're safe for now." A few executives exchanged glances. The younger ones, the ones who had spent years chafing under Richard's old-school leadership, leaned forward. The older ones looked like they were calculating how quickly they could cash out their stock options. Then the door burst open. Richard stood there, his face flushed with something that wasn't defeat. He held a single sheet of paper in his hand. "You forgot something," he said, his voice rough. Ethan didn't move. "Security should have escorted you out," Richard smirked. "They tried." He strode forward and slapped the paper onto the table. "Corporate bylaws. Article 7, Section 3. Any transfer of controlling interest must be ratified by a 2/3 majority vote of the board. And guess what, Ethan? You don't have it." For the first time, Ethan's mask slipped. Just for a second. Just enough. Miranda's cigarette paused halfway to her lips. Richard turned to the room. "This takeover isn't legal, and every one of you knows it." Silence. Then Gerald cleared his throat. "He's not wrong." Ethan's jaw tightened. "You're bluffing." Richard pulled out his phone and tapped the screen. A second later, every phone in the room buzzed. A notification from Kestrel's legal team. An emergency injunction, filed 5 minutes ago, freezing all transfers of ownership pending review. Miranda stubbed out her cigarette. "Well," she said, almost amused, "this just got interesting. The power shift." The next hour was chaos. Lawyers were called. Emergency board meetings were scheduled. The stock market, sensing blood in the water, sent Kestrel's shares into freefall. Ethan retreated to his office, Richard's old office, and locked the door. He stood at the window, staring down at the city below. His reflection in the glass looked back at him, hollow-eyed. He had planned for everything, except this. A knock. "Not now," he snapped. The door opened anyway. Miranda stepped inside, closing it softly behind her. "You should have read the fine print," she said. Ethan didn't turn around. "I did. There was no clause." Miranda smiled. "There wasn't, until I added it." That got his attention. He spun to face her. "What?" She shrugged. "Insurance policy. Richard always was sentimental about loopholes." Ethan's hands clenched. "You set me up." "No," Miranda said, stepping closer. "I tested you, and you failed." The air between them crackled. Then Ethan laughed, a sharp, humorless sound. "You never wanted me to take over." Miranda's smile was cold. "I wanted to see if you were smart enough to deserve it." The boardroom revolt. By 5 p.m., the news had leaked. Kestrel, in turmoil. Hostile takeover in disarray. Reporters camped outside the building. Employees whispered in the halls. The board, split down the middle, was in emergency session. Ethan sat at the head of the table again, but this time, the room wasn't silent. "This is a disaster," Gerald hissed. "The stock is tanking. The media is calling it a failed coup. We look like amateurs." Ethan's phone buzzed. A text from an unknown number. "You should have taken the deal when you had the chance." He deleted it. Then Richard walked in. He didn't look triumphant. He looked tired, but he held himself like a man who had already won. "Enough," he said. The room quieted. "We're putting this to a vote." Ethan leaned back in his chair. "You don't have the votes." Richard met his gaze. "Neither do you." A stalemate. Then Miranda spoke from the doorway. "Actually," she said, "I do." Every head turned. She held up a single sheet of paper, a proxy vote from their daughter, Sophie, granting her mother full voting rights over her shares. The balance of power shifted again. Richard's face went pale. "Sophie wouldn't—" "She did," Miranda said. "And now?" She looked at Ethan, then at Richard. "Now I decide who wins." The room held its breath. Miranda smiled. Let's talk terms. The end game. By midnight, it was over. Ethan was out. Richard was back in, but with conditions. Miranda, as the new swing vote, had brokered a deal neither man liked, but both had to accept. The company would modernize, but slowly. The layoffs were canceled, for now. And Ethan? He stood in the empty parking garage, his briefcase in hand, staring at the space where his car should have been. Then headlights flared. A black sedan pulled up. The window rolled down. Miranda looked out at him. Need a ride? Ethan didn't move. What do you want? She smiled. A partner. For the first time all day, Ethan hesitated. Then he opened the door and got in. The car pulled away into the night. Somewhere above them, in his reclaimed office, Richard Hampton stood at the window, watching them go. The game wasn't over. It had just begun.